Thank you for letting me know that the mic audio was off there. It seems like always a glitch somewhere somehow. Thanks, Wolves. Anyway, so let's start all over since our mic audio was off. Gosh, you never get used to this thing, like, with all the Zoom calls and whatever it is. It's like, yo, dude, your mic is off, switch it on. Anyway, my name is Verma Henry. This Do Better UX Design Streaming Sessions. Welcome to the show. This is our live weekly event that we do every week. We do other design streaming sort of like sessions looking at website reviews and other type of things on this channel, but we do have sort of like our weekly live event, usually on Thursdays, sometimes on Fridays. But we try and give you sort of like UX design insights. If you're somebody who's getting started in UX design, I see that the mic is working now. Thank you so much. If you're somebody who's getting started in UX design, you are a UX designer, or you're somebody who's, in a startup or trying to, find out what is the value of UX design. I think this is, one of the best places where you can get a no BS type of approach to speaking about design, finding out about design insights and all of those things. Thank you so much for letting me know that the mic is off. Please do let me know if you have any issues throughout the session. Feel free to throw your comments and anything else that you would like to discuss over in the live chat. I see that we've got some people. Feel free to introduce yourself. Tell us who's watching, where you are from, and what is it that you do. So today we're going to be talking about why companies that focus on design dominate any given market that they are in. We've seen it with, obviously companies like Apple and Google, but, with over the years, we've seen companies that take over and dominate a whole industry that have never been there. Like talk about a company like Tesla, companies like Airbnb and things like Uber, right? These companies that were never there, and they come into the industry and dominate the whole industry. And this is where we really see that power of design that I'm talking about, that I want to be talking about in this session today. We are going to be diving in a little bit into why this is, sort of the direct correlation between design practices and business performance that we have seen not only in startups and emerging companies, but we're also starting to see all the bigger companies and businesses starting to get into this space as well, adopting and really maturing their design standard and way of really making design part of their culture. And we see the impact of this in any given industry, but don't take my word for it or your word for it, since you've seen companies like Airbnb, etc. Envision, I don't know if it's a recent study. I think it was somewhere in 2020 or 2019, at the tail end of 2019, they did a study with 2,200 participating companies in 24 different industries and 77 different countries, really looking at the direct correlation between design practices and business performance. And the study is in the description below if you'd like to check that out while we're doing this, or after the fact. If you're watching this after the live event, feel free to use the comments section to interact with us, ask any questions, add your comments, etc. So Envision did a case study with 2,200 companies in 24 industries over 77 countries, really looking at companies and the direct correlation between design practices and the output on business performance. And this is something that I am using as a basis of, we are seeing more and more companies that focus on design win in every different industries. I'm talking about not only, sort of like the main industries like we have in South Africa. You might say, like your telcos, your banking, your mining sectors or whatever. These are 24 different industries, both government, non-government agencies, enterprises, all sorts of different industries where we see that companies that focus on design still do dominate in any given case. Cool. So let me get into the main meat of the day today. So what is it really that companies get out of design? And I think there are some main benefits that we see. I've recently also did a podcast called the ROI of design, so the return on investment on design. Again, in the description, the link is in the description. You can check that out. But I went into a more in-depth sort of like covering of some of these things that I'm really gonna go high level over here. So the benefit of design that we have seen in any company, right? The main one I think is really better product quality and better product fit, because companies that focus on design really look at the user and focus on the user needs, which is the core of what we are calling design in this space, is really to solve for those user needs and really focus on what the user is. So unlike other businesses that would generally focus on a business function and then try to put that into the market and find market fit, companies that focus on design really build better products and better quality products purely because they build it with their users hand to hand, answering the needs that they need with the users. So we definitely always see that companies that focus on design tend to have better performing products, not only better to use products, but also better performing products when it comes to things like customer retention and things like onboarding, just because they focus on the quality of the design. So that is the first one. Again, I've went into more detail in the podcast, the ROI of design. You can check out that in the link below, but I'm just gonna go over this quickly in the interest of not wasting too much time on something that I've covered already in a different medium. So the first one is better products, right? We definitely see that with companies like Google, with companies like Tesla, better cars, better apps, better services that are really well thought out and really put together nicely. So that is the first thing that we see in most companies that focus on design. The second thing that we usually see in companies that focus design is really that operational efficiency, which really speaks to how the employees in that specific organization or company are efficient in working throughout the process of designing and developing the product, because there's certain processes in place and there's certain sort of like strategically laid out systems and things put together, from things like design thinking processes, human-centered design processes. These really help design teams optimize the way that they do things and be able to move a little bit faster than companies that don't focus on design, that spend a lot of time trying to define the product requirements, the product features and things like that. Whereas there's processes like design thinking processes, the design sprint process, that can help you sort of like zoom through these the timelines that usually take other companies that don't focus on design months and months. These are some of the things that can literally be done in weeks in some design thinking practices and methodologies that people can use. So that operations efficiency, employee effectiveness, literally directly interprets to speed to market, right? So companies that focus on design don't only make the process of building their products faster, but also that directly, impacts the speed you get to market, which puts, better products into market faster, and that way beating the competition along the way while they're still trying to contemplate on what features to put in, getting stakeholder alignment on, all the different people, they have different ideas and things that they would like to put into the product, and not really driving the conversation from the user need and what, problem are you actually trying to solve. That is the second one, really employee effectiveness of being able to do their job, being able to go through the design process because there's a system in place, and obviously that directly translates to speed to market, right? And the third one, the last one, but definitely not least, right? Business profitability. We do see that obviously from companies that do very good design, that they retain customers better, that they onboard more customers because the experience of onboarding customers is easier. The things like how to find their apps, the discoverability is really well thought out and put together in a way that it's really easy for customers to engage and use the product. That way we see more in customer engagement, we see more customer adoption, and we also see more customer retention purely because of better design, right? And this directly translates to revenue growth and affecting the bottom line positively. So business profitability is sort of like the third one, but definitely not the least. I mean, there is many more things that I have discussed in the podcast ROI of design. You can check it out in the description below if you would like to listen to sort of like more of the benefits around what actually makes what is the return on investment that companies should focus on, because sometimes when we have really good products, these things are sort of ignored, and we think that where there's a very good experience, it's sort of like invisible, right? Until the problems start popping out, then stakeholders start jumping out, people start realizing that there is actually a bad experience. But usually when there's a very good user experience, it becomes invisible, and the work that goes into that also becomes a little bit invisible. Cool. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments, I am monitoring the chat here. If you're watching this after the live event, feel free to use the comment section. Or if you'd like to interact with us, on a daily basis in our own kind of space where we share, information like this and other type of information like this, I'd like to invite you over to our little UX design community, slowly growing intentionally. We're really trying to keep it tight so that we can try and keep the engagements a little bit high, and really have people who are interested in learning about UX design and applying UX design. So check out our little UX design community over at LinkedIn. If you just look out Do Better UX, or just go to our website dobetterux.com, you'll be able to find everything there, our blog, our podcast, our links to our community, and even to this page as well. But if you're part of our community, you will be able to sort of like engage with us on an ongoing basis, and you don't have to wait for these weekly live events to be able to ask specific questions that are based on a specific topic. You sort of like have the freedom to talk with us in any given way or form or format. Cool. So moving on, is that a lot of companies, especially here in South Africa, are starting to realize the value of design, or rather that the companies that focus on design dominate in any given market. And a lot of companies are starting to put together, UX design teams are starting to get on the bandwagon of, bringing design into their, organizations and things like that. But another thing that we also see is that not many organizations actually understand what this whole design thing is and how to embed it and make it really a part of their culture. Some of them do have a good understanding and are getting into a way of really embedding it, and they're getting into the UX design and making it a part of their culture. But it's really something that we are seeing starting. So really, this speaks to what we call the design maturity of the company, which is mainly described in the report that I have referenced earlier on, the InVision report that I've referenced earlier on. They really talk about the different stages of the design maturity of different companies, right? I won't get into all of the different ones. There's about 5 of them, I want to believe so, from the report. Very extensive information that will give you a direct correlation of design practices, the level of design practices, and the performance of the business. I see that we have a question here in the chat. I want to ask if there is a South African company that that has implemented design well. Yes, I think we have seen a lot of design implemented well, mainly in South Africa. I think from the startup environment, where there's a little bit more flexibility and freedom to sort of really jump into design with a lot of autonomy, without a lot of red tape. There's a lot of design culture that is driving into the bigger organizations in South Africa, but again, this speaks to the maturity model thing that I want to get into now, around how much design can penetrate a culture of an organization depending on scale. So we've seen a lot of things, like, just from the top of my mind, not to advertise any brands, I think companies like Ukesha are doing something really interesting and really focused on sort of like design and designing for the customer. There's companies like True ID that are also really focusing on design and really innovating in the open banking space, in the sort of like open data space. So you please, Bulls, if I can answer that, I think I've seen it more in the startup space. There's also a company that I worked with called FinChatBot that really, has implemented design well, and has, these companies that I'm talking about have a level of, design maturity that is probably a little bit higher than most of the bigger companies, purely because of the size of the companies that they are. That way, if you have, 10 or 15 people to influence in a startup, is easier than having different levels of executives and leadership teams and other people that you need to get buy-in into this design culture when it comes to bigger organizations. So I hope that I answered your question there, and I'm going to move on to what I was talking about around design maturity. So what is design maturity? So I think design maturity really describes the level of which a company is when it comes to design thinking and design considerations and problem solvings, and how all of that is baked into the process of the business and how they do these things. I'm just gonna skip this track quickly because it's distracting me. I don't know how much you can hear the background music here, but yeah, I try to add a little bit more pace to my conversation as I do these things. So design maturity really speaks to how much design is baked into the business process, into the business thinking, into the sort of like considerations and things that happen in the business, right? From the highest senior level, coming up with ideas and sort of like product ideas to position into the market, the mindset of the senior team, the product development cycle, and sort of like the product roadmap, how all of that is done. That speaks to so the more design is embedded into all of those processes, the more sort of like mature the company is when it comes to design maturity in a company. Again, I have linked the InVision report that can show you the different levels, the different 5 levels of design maturity. But I'm really going to talk right now about sort of like the very first entry level, just to paint a picture for you to be able to understand what we're talking about here when it comes to embedding design into your organization. So I'm just going to talk about sort of like the basics of what the basic company at level 1 is, and what the basic sort of like company is at level 5 of design maturity. For example, you can check out the details of all the sort of like 5 design maturity levels in the InVision case study below. Cool. So I see that I've answered the gentleman in the chat there. I'm gonna come back to the questions in the chat just in a little bit, so that I don't lose my sort of like flow and train of thought as I'm going through this. But I am monitoring the chat, so feel free to keep on bringing them on. I'm going to go in and start answering some of those things and interacting with the chat as well. So don't feel like I'm ignoring or neglecting the chat. I will be back to you just now. So back to design maturity. You can check out the 5 levels of design maturity. I just want to paint a picture really of companies that are not so mature, and how that looks like, and what a company that is really mature looks like. So the first level of design maturity is really companies that have not adopted design thinking at all. Do not think about the user when it comes to designing products. They are more leaning towards the idea that design is just a function of beauty, of aesthetics, something that will make something look nicer. Over my career, I've had these scenarios where UX designers have been treated like just the person that does the decoration on the cake, sort of like put the lipstick on the product before you ship it out, to make sure that it looks and feels nice. There's this term called look and feel, which has been something that I've hated all my design career, right? Because I don't think that user experience is just about look and feel. There's so much more that happens when it comes to user experience, because we're really talking about usefulness, right? We're really talking about the usability of the actual product itself. How usable is it? How much does it solve the person's needs? And that way you won't have to fight with things like product fit into the market, etc., etc. So companies that are really at the basic level of design maturity at level 1 or 0 don't really understand the value that design brings to them. There's a lot of the mindset of the senior team, which is really based on building business-based products. They're not thinking about the customer. They're thinking that design is just an aesthetic thing, is something that will be added on as a layer before you ship the thing out, so that you have it in a nice red bow, right? That way you have done some design. And I think that comes from really not understanding what UX design is, or what user experience design is, or design thinking, or human-centered design is, whichever way you want to think it. It's really a mindset that comes from the days of graphic design and probably just web design, because it's based on aesthetics, right? And I think that's where the phrase design puts off people a little bit, because a lot of people think that design equals creativity, equals beautiful pictures, whereas in this context that we're actually speaking at is that that is not the design that we're speaking about here. We're really speaking about the ability to get into problem solving, the ability to get into user-centered design, thinking about the customer that you're designing for and being able to solve your customer's needs. I think that's more of the definition that we're going with for design in this context. When you talk about UX design or design thinking or design maturity in a company, we're really not talking about the aesthetic part. We're really talking about the ability of having design as a process, as something that is fully bought in the company, etc., etc. And on the other end of the spectrum, right, on the companies that are fully matured when it comes to being fully having a lot of design maturity, these are organizations like your Googles and Apples that really have design as the core part of their businesses. And this is really a culture of innovation, a culture of driving different ways of thinking, a culture of problem solving that is embedded in these organizations. And it's really from the top down, and it's not just a bunch of UX designers that are trying to influence the senior team or the executives the value of design. It's a company that has seen the value of design, understands that they are actually designing for a market that has got real people and humans that they have problems that they need to solve for, and then they really solve and bring their products to life from a human-centered design, from a user perspective, from a problem solving perspective. So that is what we see in companies like Airbnb, Tesla, Google, etc., etc. If you look at some of these companies and what they do, it's not really the innovation and people being super smart. It's really listening to the customers, talking to the people who will be using their products, understanding what their needs and where this product fits in those people's life experiences, right? Again, as user experience designers, we are not designing experiences, we are just enhancing and optimizing experiences that are already there, right? The driving experience is already there. The experience of buying an item over the counter or on the internet is already there. Our job as designers is to really optimize those experiences. So we're not really creating experience, we're optimizing those experiences, and that's what some of the companies that are really mature in design focus on, is really to understand that there is these experiences and these different things that are already there, and their job is to really get in there, understand the context of the user, of what is the objective, what is the user actually trying to do, what is the user trying to achieve. Because with every product, a person or a user is trying to achieve something, right? If you are using Netflix, you're trying to get entertained. It's either you're trying to get entertained, you're trying to solve a pain. If you're using Uber, you're trying to save time and money, etc., etc. There's all these different concepts that sit behind some of the biggest products that we see out there, and focusing on all of this from the top level down really correlates to building better products and really being able to have a better well-functioning oiled machine, design machine, if I can put it that way, that is able to put products faster to the market, be able to sort of like gather user insights, user needs, and be able to really solve for those users going into it. So those are sort of like the two different ends of the spectrum. There's obviously different levels of understanding, of penetration, of the understanding of user experience into the, executive team, into, senior management, all the way trickling down to actually people who do the groundwork and how they optimize their experience, their processes to be more effective at building better products faster, right? So those are the two sort of like spectrums and the two different ends. I'm going to go in here and then, so Bull says, you've answered me. Much appreciated. Makes sense when you say design maturity plays a big role in how well a company implements design. Yeah, definitely. So I think, the penetration of how much a company puts design at the core of what they do really speaks to, the output of how much of the design, good design that they put out there. So I've seen this in many scenarios where organizations jump on the design bandwagon, hire UX design teams purely because they know that the competitor is doing it, but not really know how to optimize that and be able to use that. And I think that, it's really the role of the UX designers and the design leads that are being hired in these organizations to be able to show the value of, the different levels of design. And again, I have discussed that in the return on investment podcast, return on investment of design podcast that I recently did. Again, description in the link below if you want to check it out to get a little bit more details. But in a nutshell, right, the reason why companies that focus on design win is based on a couple of things, really, right? Really understanding the user and building products that, fit with the user, not finding market fit after the fact, right? Like most businesses try and build a product and then try and find market fit after the fact. It's actually businesses building products hand to hand with the user, getting user insights, understanding their needs and solving for those specific problems. So that is number one. Number two is really, being able to be effective at how you get to the product, and this really speaks to the quality and the speed to market that you get to, right? So you don't only get to the market a little bit faster because you have a clear process that you can follow, but also your product is much more packed. You don't have a lot of iterations and revisions once you launch because you have answered most of those questions within the design process. You're sort of like not learning new things about your users once your product is in the customer's hands already, right? So you sort of have the understanding of what you're trying to do getting into the product before you even get to hand, and that really speaks to having a better product, a more robust product, and getting to market faster. And obviously things like more revenue. Obviously having a better product speaks to better onboarding, better customer acquisition, better retention, better ease of use, etc. So those are the main things that you would really, get benefit from. And that is why most companies not most companies, the companies that focus on design in any given industry, we see, and depending on the maturity, more on their design maturity as well, right? So if you look at companies that have took design to be at the core of everything they do and really embrace the voice of the user and really embrace the different processes and systems that come within design, those companies move way faster, have more features in customers' hands, have way better features in customers' hands, in better timelines, etc. So putting all those things together, we start to sort of paint a picture to see why companies that focus on design really win in any given market. And when I say in any given market, I've gave you sort of examples of things, companies like Tesla, right, which is an automotive company that has really focused on design and went into a market that has major players who have dominated the industry for decades, and just went in and crushed all those competitors purely because of having design ingrained, purely embedded into the process of how they do everything. I mean, Tesla is a very design-led company. If you look at not only the aesthetics of their cars and the function and things that they put unpack into the cars is really remarkable and really answer everyday user issues that users have, right? Like the autopilot thing where the car can drive itself from, a puddle of water so that you don't have to step in a puddle of water to get in your car. These are everyday simple things that really make the big difference when it comes to building a more superior product. So that is my take on some of the things that help companies that focus on design dominate and win in any given market. If you have any comments and things that you would like to add onto this conversation, please do consider joining us over at our Do Better UX design community over on LinkedIn. I think the link should be in the description below as well. But if you just search Do Better UX on LinkedIn, you should be able to find our page and our group. Please do join the group, and if you'd like to continue the conversation there, I will be more than happy to. This has been this week's live design streaming session. I see that we have exhausted our time here. Thank you so much for joining me for this live design streaming session. We do this every week, so if you are interested in this type of content, please do consider subscribing so that when we put up our next event, you'll be able to get notified when it goes live. That way you won't miss any of the interesting topics that you might want to catch every week as we do this. We also do sort of like ad hoc things like portfolio reviews, website reviews, different type of design streaming sessions depending on things that interest us that week, or we really can't hold ourselves to talking about, so we just put it out there. So it's not just the weekly event that you would get. So if that sounds like something that you are interested in, again, please consider subscribing to the channel. And until we meet again next week, my name is Verma Henry. I'm your host here at Do Better UX Design Streaming Sessions, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for joining us.